Hello, friends. So, I wanted to take some time and talk more about the Shadow Months, the live group mentorship program that I'll be running this year and into next year. The next cohort begins soon, basically now. The model itself of the program is 3 months of preparation. So, from the summer solstice to the fall equinox. It's kind of this self-study hermitage time. And then at the equinox, if not a little bit earlier, depending on the group that constellates around this starry altar, we will begin with our bi-weekly live meetings and also share occasional workshops sprinkled in between. And so it's basically like meeting 3 times a month as a group from equinox to equinox for 6 months through the shadow months, the dark half of the year. And I've been running this program for a couple years now, and I've had actually a core group of individuals that have just carried on through. We've moved through the light and the shadow months a few times now together because we just wanted to keep studying astrology together, which has been really awesome. But because of that coherence and the community that developed, it's given me the opportunity to actually examine how I want to hold the future cohorts of this work and, learning from experience what really resonated, what was really impactful for community learning of astrology, and also the facets that I'm kind of challenging and examining in my own astrological praxis that I want to bring more formatively into this year's Shadow Months cohort. So I'm going to share about what it's looked like with the current group of students and how we've navigated mentorship together, and also how I want it to be different for this coming autumn. And so I think to start by saying the intention that I had for live group mentorship was to build off of the foundational teachings of astrology. So a few years ago now, I put out this whole asynchronous course library that has like 60 hours of all of the different teachings on the planets, the zodiac, the house system, with the intention to give the building blocks of astrology so that folks could deepen in their own chart interpretation skills. But the online course library being asynchronous, to me, is like only half of the scope of practice, if even that, right? Because in my experience, you can't really learn the reality of astrology as a divination practice and the skills of interpreting a chart without the live coherence of unpacking that together, right? It's such a living study. It's such a ecology unto itself that actually having the building blocks is half the battle, right? Understanding the planets as ancestors and the unique mythologies surrounding them throughout different cultures, all of that is such important content to have as your foundation. And of course, that applies also to the zodiacal wheel and the house system. Like really knowing your shit as it pertains to those building blocks, super important. And that's all of the content, the foundational teachings that are in this like asynchronous course library. But when I had built that many years ago now, I was thinking to myself, like, that gives people the tools to get started, right? It like sets the wheel in motion. But I just know from my own lived praxis that I didn't really start to synthesize all of those foundational elements until I started reading charts and looking at charts and applying all of the theory into like the mystery of life. And that's the difference, I think, between the kind of empirical knowledge of a system, which you can approach astrology in that way. You can approach astrology as like a set of patterns and a system to be studied in this kind of caricature format, right? But until you bring all of that knowledge into the world and let it actually interface with nature and reality and start to build an animate relationship to the planets and the wheel of the year and these different areas of life that are represented by the houses, that it's like the scaffolding without any body to it, right? It's like the skeleton without the actual skin and juice and like life force behind it. And, I think I'm speaking from such lived experience here. The first 5-6 years of studying astrology for me was very much about the rigor of just learning the system, just knowing my shit. And I believe you gotta know your shit if you're going to carry the responsibility of interpreting charts and this sort of thing. I'm not making a case for skipping that step. You can't, in my opinion, right? But once you really know your shit, then it's like you have to take that out into the world. It's like the movement from the 3rd house to the 9th house. We can study in books all day long, but until we get out there and experience the mysteries of life and nature and creation that are actually what this study was born of and what this system was shaped around, we're only getting half the picture, right? So this is all my long way of saying the live course mentorship itself was designed to be that kind of 9th house element, where now we're taking what we know into applied praxis. And we're challenging it, and we're turning it on its head, and we're examining what it's really made of. And so that is where we get this kind of like jungle gym experimental playground situation that happens in live group mentorship. And I didn't see any of this coming. I thought I was going to like constellate this awesome group of humans, and we were just going to go deeper into our study together of the system itself. But what I found started to happen was this total like animist miracle, where we would gather every other week following the rhythms of the new and full moon as a kind of like ritual rhythm being established, right? And we would drop into direct connection with the planetary ancestors and then start to understand through gnosis, through direct experience, what it is that they're actually bringing through this craft. It's almost like we reversed the ship in a way. And it started to reveal the actual magic of what's possible when we meet together as a live group. Like that could only happen in real time. That can't happen asynchronously, because we would drop in and do these experiences of a direct relationship, and then we would do divination, and then we would kind of cast the dice of what we think we know about Mars or about Sagittarius, and actually lean back into the spirits of the planets, lean back into our own ancestors and the larger intelligence that holds this study in creation, and see what else there was that we were maybe missing by just looking at the cliff notes of, Mars's qualities in a textbook, right? So it was bringing life back to the study. And because of the ritual pace at which we were meeting, right? We would meet every other week as a group, and then have these extra workshops where we would get more into the specifics of chart interpretation, right? How do we apply aspects? How do we apply essential dignity? How do we read the perfection year ruler or the solar return chart for an individual it's their birthday, right? It's like getting into the nitty-gritty of chart reading skills and working that out together. All of that ritual pace of learning in real time with one another started to like just really turn the study inside out. And so as I'm preparing to like renew the curriculum really for this year's cohort, I'm thinking about how we can push it even further. And it became very clear to me over the past couple years of mentorship that the emphasis on animism, the emphasis on relating to the planets and the celestial powers as forms of ancestral intelligence and not just objects in the sky that have something like have a measurable orbit, right? When we dilute the ecology of astrology to just a set of patterns, we miss the whole point, in my opinion, right? This study, when we trace back to its origin, was developed from a constant relationship to the land and to the sky, right? Astrology itself, going all the way back to Babylonian times, where we have the first relics of this tradition that we still hold today, was a kind of agricultural model of reference for what's happening on our home planet, what's happening in the landscape, and how is that being reflected in the sky? And how do we then start to use the sky as a mirror and a map for our rhythms and reality, but also relating to these bigger powers, the planets, the stars, as deities, as gods, as faculties of intelligence that we could be in relationship with and thus experience direct gnosis from their workings. It's so alive. And, this isn't anything revolutionary. I'm not saying that I'm recreating the wheel and how we're doing this, but I am saying that I see the value of actually completing the circuit by returning to those origins of this animist relationship to astrology as we know it, to start to parse and find what's really here beyond all of the patterns and what can be measured, right? And I feel also excited about weaving in other facets of just my own life and praxis and turning it up a notch, really emphasizing astrology as a ritual practice. Every time we're coming into contact with the planets that we'll be studying, understanding how we can relate with them ritually as well, based on the traditional observances of planetary magic, but also our own relationship directly. Because at this point in my life and practice, astrology and ritual are how I move through the world. And that comes down to the simplicity of checking what the planets are doing each day and forming my life around their rhythms and movements to live in ritual time, to live in circular time, right? But then how we break that down and apply it to our own life is going to be different for each person. So yeah, I just feel so excited about turning up the dial on the ritual aspect as we study astrology. I wish in some ways that in the early years of my own undertaking of the study that I was given more of a nudge to incorporate ritual, because that's where it comes alive. That's where the cycle of Venus as the evening star and as the morning star has this mythological aliveness that I can relate to directly in the visible sky, right? So all of those aspects of animism and ritual practice come together when we really center that in our astrological study. It revivifies the whole map, right? And it's no longer just something that we're reading about in a book, but it's something that we're relating to constantly and actually inviting the intelligence of those cycles and this ecology to teach us directly, right? And that's where I really also feel quite passionate about decentralizing the leadership model, right? I'm not interested in people gathering in circle for me to be the teacher telling you, the knowledge transference of let me tell you about Mars. It's let Mars tell you about Mars. And let's talk about it together and explore what we already know and what the history and origins of Mars has looked like throughout different cultures and throughout the actual framework of astrology itself, but then have our own embodied experience and relationship to the energy and the intelligence of Mars as the secret third thing that really fills in the gap, and then of course grounds our practice in an embodied space. And I think about it too in the way, for example, having a podcast, the Week Ahead podcast on the Altar of Stars that I've been doing every week for almost 3 years now. I rarely look at what's actually happening in the transits anymore. I'll give a glance as to what's happening in the sky, and then from there I'll just drop into connection with the planets as I know them, as I experience them, and let their messages speak through me. That's celestial divination, right? And I really feel the more that I expand my own practice of astrology beyond just knowing the framework and letting all of this like wild aliveness pour through the cracks of it, it's like the true work of the astrologer is to be a diviner, right? And when we look back at the Arabic roots of the study too, that developed from Babylonian astrology, and then of course developed into Western astrology as we know it today, like the development that the Arabs provided for astrology as a kind of framework and praxis, it was the meeting place between the kind of codified structure itself and the divinatory practice. It wove in both. And when I think about my own ancestors really using this study in their life, it was a conversation. It wasn't just pattern recognition, right? And it was opening oneself to be the meeting place of earth and sky, and let that be where our divination was coming from and coming through. And so I'm more interested in learning the framework so that we can then get to the place where that divination comes through us naturally. And I feel too that is what was so important for me in my background with astrology, was like, it was really important for me to learn the nitty-gritty details and to really have the structure down so that then I could drop it to a certain degree and not forget it, but say like, yeah, all of that, and Mars, what do you have to say directly? Like, if I feel you in my body, what are you speaking? What are you doing through the like pulse and rhythm of creation and nature as you're woven into it? None of this exists outside of the kind of cosmic order of creation and reality and nature, right? So we're tuning in a level deeper to relate to the planets as a part of that larger ecosystem of intelligence, as they've always been, right? But sometimes that gets lost on us when we're just fixated on what's in the books. We lose relationship, direct relationship, and then of course direct gnosis. So we're playing with all these threads, right? There was something else I wanted to say about that, but I'm trusting that it'll come back if it's needed. Yeah, so, and I also want to say too, I'm curious about this. This will be new for me to bring in this year, and I may or may not center it a lot, but also weaving in our own ancestors. Because for me, like at a personal level, astrology is a deeply ancestral practice. I have many astrologers in my family. It's something that's not just like in a spirit level, but also in like a lineage level. This is something that I know that my own family has been practicing for many generations. And also just knowing the history, especially on the Levantine side of my ancestry, how deeply rooted the study as we know it today is in those Arabic roots. I have found it to be really helpful to connect with my own people as I'm studying the craft, and like actually ask my ancestors through direct connection, as I'm feeling into the wisdom of Taurus, for example. It's like, what did they have to say about that too? So we'll weave our ancestors into the conversation for those that want to. I'm even thinking about doing some like preparatory ancestor circle work just for the folks that are going to be in this cohort of mentorship, so that we can start to just bring our own people into the conversation as well, and understand that, we'll be studying the Western tropical system, which comes from also the roots of like Hellenistic astrology, which before that comes from Arabic and Egyptian, Babylonian, all the way back through. But no matter where your people come from on this good earth, there was inevitably, absolutely, some cosmological framework that was being reflected in their relationship to the sky. All of our people, no matter where they lived on this good earth, used the sky to navigate. The sea, the desert, the forest, the mountains. this was our map at night. And so not only was there a point of reference created for like, how do we ask that the stars guide us home, but also the sky itself became a blank canvas upon which they painted their own stories, their own gods and deities. And that's really the limitation of studying Western tropical, is that we just have the kind of Greco-Roman stories cast upon the sky. The constellations, the zodiac, all of this is just one cosmological framework amongst many. And so the invitation as we learn is also, as deeply as you want to weave in your own people and understand what they were seeing, right? So that might not be super centered, but it'll be something that we weave into consideration. And who knows, like, something I've been humbled by again and again is it's really not up to me when we're inviting the ancestors into the conversation. You know, I trust that they'll bring what they want to bring. But yeah, that leads me to the last kind of pillar of the work this season, this roundabout, that feels really important, is that of tending the cultural wounds. And it's just because it's become so loud in my own relationship to astrology that I can't unsee it. And so the reality is, as I'm holding this group, that's going to inevitably be in the space, is the examination of the colonial shadows that live within this system, that are kind of baked into the framework based on the timeline of astrology's history and how it was used over time, especially in regards to like centuries where astrology was being used to serve the agenda of the ruling class and thus the agenda of empire. And so a lot of the interpretations that we get have this kind of undercurrent of colonial paradigm baked into them. And it becomes very obvious when we start to look at the dignities and we start to look at the relationship between a planet in a certain sign or even in a certain house territory and what that means, right? Understanding that all of those interpretations were born of a very specific context. If we go back far enough, they were born of an agricultural context. But then more recently, in the timeline of history from the origin up until now, we move from an agricultural context into then the context of this tool being wielded for the agenda of empire and those in power. And so whatever those in power wanted to be used to wield power over the people, right? That's what gets baked into the study, and thus our interpretations, our understandings. And so all of this to say, part of what we'll be doing in the live group mentorship cohort this year and probably forever into the future is examining, like when we talk about Mars, what do we think we know? What are our ideas about these planets? What's our ideas about Saturn? How did it look in different mythologies throughout time? But then what are these undercurrents, if we really examine it closely, that are clearly used to support some kind of colonial agenda? Because the thing about the inheritance that's there is that we can either interrupt it or perpetuate it. And I would rather interrupt it. I would rather us get curious with like, okay, these paradigms are being like, they're running through the framework as we're receiving it. If we examine it and unpack it, what's really there beyond that kind of colonial shadow? Because that then goes into our interpretations for how we talk about the planets and the zodiac and how, like, that's how we end up interpreting other people's charts. And right there, where we become the steward of a thing, we either have the option to interrupt the colonial narrative or just perpetuate it through our interpretations, right? So that's what we're going to get curious with too, together as a group. We're going to kind of group mind that on purpose, because I don't have all the answers. That's the thing here. And that's what I was speaking to earlier when I mentioned like decentralizing leadership. It's like, yeah, I'll constellate the group and trust that the right humans are coming to circle. And I'll share about what I know and what I've been taught through lineage based on astrology itself. And then what? Like, what do you have to say? What do you have to bring? What can you see that I'm not looking at? I've been so humbled and amazed over the past 2 years of the live group mentorship that's been underway by the incredible insights that people have brought to the table that I would have never thought of. I don't have all the answers. I'm not interested in that kind of power dynamic in leading the space. I am just as much a student as everyone else in this study, as we will always be. That's the truth of it. There's no completing and mastering astrology in a single lifetime. I feel that's really true. And so as we undertake the study together, it's like, what do you see about this? I've been imagining the cohort as a circle gathered around a many-faceted gem. And the light is shining through this gem and it's refracting different images back to each person. But each individual has a very specific vantage point through which they're looking at this central gem or altar, right? And so we're centering the study of astrology and we're looking at it through the lenses of animism and ancestral remembrance and ritual. But then we're also examining that kind of like cultural wounding that's also in there. And everyone's going to see something different. That's where I'm most excited about the live group aspect and the community aspect, because that shit can only happen in real time together. That can't happen in a pre-recorded asynchronous course. You know, like it's the miracle of what emerges in live group space and the communal wisdom. So, I feel so excited. I feel really excited. So reach out with questions. I think this is also another thing that I'm like, I'm more interested in the right group of people, meaning like people who are excited and passionate about all the things I'm talking about and like getting together and exploring together. I'm more interested in that than like the tuition issues. So if that's a barrier to you joining and you feel super about this work and you're ready to be a participant, especially because that's the thing, is like, this isn't an asynchronous offering on purpose. The biggest desire I have is that people who are ready to participate are taking their seat in the circle, you know? And so reach out if you feel into this. And of course, if cost is a barrier, I want to know that, because I'm way more interested in what we can actually do together with this study to unpack it and transform it to serve the world that we actually want to be participating in and the stories and narratives upon which that world is built. Because I really believe more than anything else that astrology is a tool that we can use to shape reality as we know it. So much of the cosmology within this framework can help us wayfind. And then, of course, the very real animate element of calling upon the planets as living forms of intelligence, as forces that can support us in this remembering and transforming of reality as we know it. That's the whole other level, is how much is actually afforded by being in relationship with the living ecology of this study and not just objects in space in this kind of disenchanted worldview, right? Like, astrology serves an enchanted worldview, and we need that more than ever right now, if I can be so bold to say. So yeah, reach out if you're interested. And I just want to end by saying, because I think this is something that I don't talk about a lot, and it applies both to the live mentorship content and my own kind of approach and understanding, but also if you're someone that's like, I'm not into the live mentorship group, I just want to do the asynchronous study. That's also always available. The course library that I built out a few years ago and is continuing to be added to as we weave with these new threads, it's like evergreen lifetime access if you want to join that. And then you can just be in the study on your own. Like if you feel you're not ready for the live group mentorship, people who are in that asynchronous study with the library content will always be invited into future cohorts of mentorship. So you can start there and then join in to the mentorship at a later time if you want to. But the content in there especially comes from my own background in both Western tropical and the Vedic tradition. And I say that people get confused by this sometimes. They're like, oh, so you teach Vedic, you teach Jyotish, and I don't teach Jyotish. For me, it's rooted so deeply in Vedic culture and the ritual life ways within that culture, and I wasn't brought up in that. And so there's a degree to which, not that I feel unable to carry it, but it's just not where I'm also, it's not like the vantage point I'm sitting at, right? So I do, however, like my background in astrology started as self-study and finding Demetra George's work many years ago and like dabbling in the Hellenistic Western realm. But then I became an Ayurvedic physician. And so for many, many years, I had to study Jyotish and was really steeped in Vedic astrology for like 5 solid years, which is what actually, beyond anything else, instilled in me the living relationship to the grahas, to the planets, as forces of intelligence. Because in the Vedic tradition, they are deified. Saturn is Shani. Like there's a wisdom and intelligence and a ritual tending that is very much a part of Vedic tradition in general, but especially in Jyotish. And so that's what helped me to form this kind of living relationship to the planetary powers and the zodiac and the house system that I wasn't getting from Western astrology. And so the synthesis of them is like, how do we relate to the aliveness of these powers through their stories, through their mythologies? Myth helps us to build relationship because it's no longer an abstract concept. It's a living story that holds intelligence, right? And all of the planets, the whole system, has a very rich mythology across many different cultures, not just Vedic or, Greco-Roman times. So I share that because I do talk a lot about the Vedic cosmology. Not that we're learning Jyotish, but that those myths and those stories of how to come into relationship with the powers and understand their personhood, understand their agency and intelligence was a total game changer for me. And that is what like reanimated and enchanted my relationship to astrology as like a living praxis. So if you're interested in that kind of unique crossroads, that's my background. And for the past 5, 6 years, I've been much more rooted in Western Hellenistic. But I think it's also important to be able to hold many different traditions and find the congruence and the coherence between them, because that's telling us a story that's part of a much bigger picture. And we lose so much when we just get fixated on what one system says about who Saturn is, right? So I'll leave it there. Thanks so much for watching. And of course, reach out with any questions that you have. But I feel really excited. There's already an amazing group of people that have registered to join us. And yeah, the early bird, I grunt at the capitalistic games of it, but yeah, the entry is now, basically. And I highly recommend people that are new to astrology to register ASAP so that you have 3 months to spend time with the online course content. Like if you feel like you know nothing about Jupiter, watch the Jupiter teaching video. All of them are like an hour long. Spend time with Jupiter. All of it in the library is very much through the lens of storytelling, so you can go for a walk and listen to me yap about Jupiter, which is probably more suited for it. But that is to say, if you're brand new to this, make sure to register soon so you have some time to spend with those foundational teachings, because it's what we'll actually build off of during the live mentorship. And if you're well versed in this study, bring it. I also think it's really true. I mean, I'm still studying under so many different teachers in astrology, and I probably always will be, because there's always more to learn. There's always more to see. I could hear the stories about Mercury a million times and always find something new by their very nature. And so that's where the real inquiry of the live wisdom will come in. So I really feel that this is designed for people that are either brand new, which is kind of awesome, because then it's like, this is your first time meeting Venus. That's exciting, or it's from people that are a little bit more versed and have some experience under their belts, but want to go a little bit deeper. We're going to be learning from one another no matter what. And I don't feel that this is necessarily a space where someone can get left behind. If that starts to feel like the case, obviously I'm here to offer support, and you'll always have access to the online library if you feel like you need to go back and learn a little bit more about the 12th house or something like this. You always have that reference, which I feel is really nice to just know that there's resource if you're needing it. So, all right, enough yapping. Much love, my friends. Thanks for watching, and hope to see some of you in circle. We start real time in September, so join us now at the early bird rate, because it will double after that, and I do that on purpose, obviously. Get in here. Much love.